You are looking at a box that contains a toy, a bag of fries, a burger, and a soft drink. It weighs maybe 400 grams. And it is, without exaggeration, one of the most precisely engineered psychological weapons ever aimed at a human being. The problem is that human being is 4 years old. Here's what this video is actually about. The Happy Meal is not a children's meal with a toy inside. It is the entry point of a multi-billion-dollar system designed to rewire how your child's brain experiences food, desire, and reality itself. Most people look at it and see a parent doing something nice. That framing is exactly what the system needs to survive. Because the moment you understand what's actually happening inside that cheerful little box, you can't unsee it. And by the end of this video, you won't. We're going to go through 4 layers of this machine. The psychological capture of children, the chemical engineering of the food itself, the catastrophic history of the fries specifically, and the global lobbying network that keeps governments from doing anything about any of it. And there is one thing buried in the middle of all this that most people, even people who follow this stuff closely, have never heard. We'll get there. Let's start with the second most disturbing piece of this entire puzzle, because it earns your trust fast. Children in the US between the ages of 4 and 12 directly influence adult purchasing decisions worth an estimated 330 billion per year. That is not a rounding error. That is the entire economy of many countries. And the fast food industry has known this number, or something very close to it, for decades. So the question they were always asking wasn't how do we convince parents? It was how do we get the child to do that for us? The answer they landed on was the toy. The toy inside a Happy Meal is not a bonus. It is the product. The food is the delivery vehicle. Researchers who study child development use a term called Pester power, sometimes called the nag factor, and it describes something specific. Children up to around age 8 are cognitively unable to recognize advertising as advertising. They cannot process the commercial intent behind a character, a color, or a piece of cheap plastic. Their brains simply don't have that filter yet. So when a 4-year-old sees a toy tied to a meal, they don't think this company wants my parents' money. They think I want that. And then they say so. Loudly, repeatedly, until something happens. What's remarkable is how physical this gets. Studies on the nag factor show that younger children, specifically, tend to become noticeably more physical in their demands when packaging and characters are involved. They don't just ask. They grab, they pull, they cry. And parents, who are already managing 100 other things, eventually give in. Not because they're bad parents, because the system was built to exhaust them into it. The toy itself is engineered for this. McDonald's has run licensed promotions with Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, Nintendo, Pokemon, and virtually every major children's media franchise that has ever existed. The toy changes every few weeks, which means the desire resets every few weeks. A child who already has the last toy still wants the new one. The collection never completes. The loop never closes. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. The toy doesn't just create desire for the toy. It creates desire for the food. And not just the desire, the actual sensory experience of eating it. In 2007, a team of researchers at Stanford University led by Dr. Tom Robinson ran a study on 63 preschoolers between the ages of 3 and 5. They had the children sample foods in taste tests, where the food was wrapped in McDonald's packaging and in unmarked wrappers. The foods were completely identical. Same fries, same carrots, same milk. The only variable was the bag or wrapper they came in. Almost 77% of the children said the McDonald's labeled fries tasted better, while only 13% preferred the ones in plain packaging. That's already striking. But then it gets more interesting. 54% preferred the McDonald's wrapped carrots versus 23% who liked the plain wrapped sample. Raw carrots from a grocery store tasted better to preschoolers when they came out of a McDonald's bag. Dr. Robinson said the kids' perception of taste was physically altered by the branding. Think about what that actually means. The logo rewrote the neurological experience of eating, not the preference for the logo, the actual taste. The children were not performing. They genuinely tasted something different. The researchers also found that children with more television sets in their homes and children who ate at McDonald's more often were more likely to prefer the taste of foods if they thought they came from McDonald's. The more exposure, the deeper the rewrite. The system compounds. So before the child has ever made a single independent food choice, the brand has already colonized their sensory perception. That is what the box is for. The food inside almost doesn't matter yet. The goal is the imprint. Now, the food does matter. A lot. Because once the brand has done its work, what the food actually contains takes over. And this is where we need to talk about something called hyperpalatability. The bliss point is the amount of an ingredient, such as salt, sugar, or fat, that optimizes deliciousness in a food product. Pioneering work on this concept was carried out by American market researcher and psychophysicist Howard Moskowitz. Moskowitz worked with companies like Pepsi, Unilever, and others, running thousands of taste tests to find the mathematically precise ratio of those three ingredients that produces the maximum possible pleasure response without tipping into feeling overwhelmed by the taste. The human body responds to that combination with a reward in the form of a jolt of endorphins, remembers what produced that reward, and is driven to repeat it, an effect run by dopamine. The reason this matters is that in nature, the combination of very high fat, very high sugar, and very high salt essentially doesn't exist in the same food. An apple has sugar, but it's wrapped in fiber and water. Nuts have fat, but the cellular structure forces you to chew them slowly, which triggers satiety hormones that tell your brain you've had enough. Ultra-processed foods strip all of that out. The fiber is gone. The cellular structure is gone. The food hits your bloodstream almost immediately. The dopamine fires, and the satiety signal never quite arrives. The right combination of salt, sugar, and fat triggers the brain's reward system while disrupting the body's natural fullness mechanism. There's also a second mechanism at work that almost nobody talks about, and it's called sensory-specific satiety. Normally, when you eat too much of one flavor, your taste receptors get bored. The stimulus fades. You stop eating naturally. It's a protective mechanism the body developed over hundreds of thousands of years. Food chemists bypass it by building flavor profiles that are intensely stimulating but deliberately hard to categorize. The brain keeps searching for the resolution of the flavor, the moment it can fully identify what it's tasting, and that moment never comes. So you keep eating. The crunch of the outer shell gives way to the softness inside. The salt hits before the fat. The fat lingers after the sweetness fades. The receptors never settle, and sensory fatigue never sets in. And then there is vanishing caloric density. Certain foods, and French fries are a textbook example, are engineered to melt or dissolve in the mouth almost instantly. The physical mass disappears before the brain has registered it as food. Researchers describe the result as pleasure without satiety. The stomach fills, but the brain remains in a state of wanting. You eat more because neurologically, it feels like you haven't eaten yet. Here's where the mega loop we opened at the start starts to come back around, because the food in the Happy Meal box is not an accident. It is the precise output of decades of chemical and neurological research. And the specific ingredient that made the fries the most iconic fast food product in human history was quietly, catastrophically changed in '90 in a way that affected billions of people and that almost nobody fully understands. The original McDonald's French fries were cooked in a mixture of 93% beef tallow and 7% cottonseed oil. The original fries were legendary. They had a distinctive savory depth, a shatteringly crispy exterior, and a creamy interior that no other fast food chain could match. Julia Child praised them. James Beard praised them. Ray Kroc himself described the French fry as almost sacred to him. The formula was called Formula 47, and it was the reason people drove to McDonald's specifically for the fries. Then came Phil Sokoloff. It began when a multi-millionaire businessman named Phil Sokoloff had a heart attack at 43 in 1966. Following his recovery, he attributed the cardiac event to his diet and began researching the correlation between high-fat foods and heart health, eventually founding an organization called the National Heart Savers Association, which targeted McDonald's with claims that their beef tallow-laden fries contributed to heart disease. In 1988, Sokoloff took out full-page newspaper ads attacking McDonald's for frying in beef tallow, claiming it was contributing to heart disease. His campaign was titled, "The Poisoning of America." Under mounting public pressure, McDonald's announced in 1990 that they would switch to 100% vegetable oil. The public health advocates celebrated. McDonald's framed it as a victory for consumers. After the announcement, McDonald's stock fell 8.3%. Customers could taste the difference immediate. But the stock drop was the least of the problems. The vegetable oils at that time were hydrogenated to make them semi-solid and retard spoilage, which also creates trans fats, whose metabolic dangers were not then widely known. Trans fats, as science discovered in the years that followed, are not just bad for you in the way saturated fat was accused of being. They actively raise LDL cholesterol and simultaneously lower HDL cholesterol. They damage the cardiovascular system in both directions at once. The switch that was supposed to protect the public from heart disease introduced something measurably worse into the diet of billions of people worldwide. And it stayed there for over a decade. As it turned out, the beef tallow had added more than just cholesterol to the fry. To compensate for the loss of meaty flavor, McDonald's added natural beef flavor. Even worse, the fries lost much of the contrasting soft and crunchy texture that Kroc loved. And here is where the story takes a turn that most people don't know about. That natural beef flavor wasn't just a sprinkle of seasoning. It was produced through the chemical hydrolysis of wheat and milk to simulate, on a molecular level, the amino acids and umami profile of actual beef. McDonald's added a natural beef flavor, derived from wheat and milk, to their oil blend. McDonald's was simultaneously advertising the fries as cooked in 100% vegetable oil. Millions of vegetarians, vegans, and religious Hindus took that to mean the product was plant-based. In 2002, McDonald's paid $10 million to settle lawsuits that accused the chain of mislabeling its French fries as vegetarian. In India, where the consumption of beef or beef-derived flavoring is considered a profound religious violation in Hinduism, McDonald's outlets were vandalized. The legal fallout was global. And the ingredient is still there. In the United Kingdom, McDonald's fries are actually vegan. But in the United States, that natural beef flavor still makes them off-limits to some groups. Now stop and think about the full arc of that story. The most famous fries in the world were changed not because of food science, but because of public pressure from one man who survived a heart attack. The replacement oil turned out to be worse. The flavor was then chemically simulated using animal derivatives. The product was marketed as vegetarian. A $10 million lawsuit followed. And the artificial beef simulation is still in the fries today. That is not a food story. That is a story about what happens when a corporation's cosmetic and commercial interests collide with public health panic, bad science, and zero transparency. And it is one of dozens of stories like it. If you're finding this genuinely unsettling, you're not alone. Drop a comment below with what's hitting hardest for you so far, because the next part is where the system really shows its full scale. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time, because the videos that connect to this one go even deeper into how food systems are built to operate exactly like this. Here is the thing most people assume. If a food product is genuinely harmful, governments will eventually step in and regulate it. That assumption is the most dangerous one in this entire video, because there is a global organization that has spent decades making sure that assumption stays comfortable and untested. It's called the International Life Sciences Institute, or ILSI. Founded in 1978 by a senior vice president at Coca-Cola, it presents itself publicly as a neutral, independent, scientific nonprofit dedicated to promoting public health and food safety. It is registered as a nonprofit in the US. It publishes peer-reviewed research. It has members in dozens of countries. It looks, from the outside, exactly like a legitimate scientific body. What it functioned as, for decades, was a coordination network for major corporations, including Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Nestle, PepsiCo, Monsanto, and Syngenta, to shape the scientific and regulatory environment in their favor. The agenda of ILSI's internal task forces was controlled almost entirely by industry representatives. Independent academics were included in publications to lend credibility to conclusions that had already been decided. Harvard anthropologist Susan Greenhalgh, along with other researchers who analyzed thousands of leaked internal emails, documented how the institute placed loyal members in key positions at national health authorities, at WHO committees, and at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. One of ILSI's most consequential operations took place in China. As obesity rates rose sharply in a rapidly growing population, the Western food industry faced a serious threat to its most important growth market. Through ILSI's Chinese branch, which was physically co-located with and deeply connected to the Chinese Center for Disease Control and the Ministry of Health, Coca-Cola systematically redirected the country's national obesity policy. Instead of examining the role of sugary drinks and ultra-processed foods in the obesity epidemic, The guidelines were rewritten to place almost all responsibility on insufficient physical activity. The message became, the problem isn't what you're eating, it's that you're not exercising enough. Official Chinese health guidelines adopted, in several passages, the exact wording that Coca-Cola and ILSI had put forward. In a country of 1.4 billion people, the conversation was moved from reduce sugar consumption to please exercise more. This is not a new playbook. It is a direct echo of what the tobacco industry did for decades. Fund studies, place allies in regulatory positions, and shift blame onto individual behavior. The fast food and beverage industry learned from big tobacco and then refined the strategy. And when local governments try to act independently, the industry has tools for that too. When municipalities in the UK attempted to ban advertising for high-fat, high-sugar products at bus stops and public billboards, the advertising and lobbying industry immediately threatened those municipalities with revenue losses of up to 30% and delayed implementation through bureaucratic appeals and existing legacy contracts. A report by the Food Foundation in the UK also revealed that meetings between senior government ministers and executives from companies like McDonald's and Deliveroo frequently took place outside official government buildings, in restaurants or on golf courses, and were recorded in public registers simply as vague intros or catch-ups to avoid formal documentation requirements. The meetings happened. The influence was real. The paper trail was minimal by design. So now you have the full picture. And here is the thing we planted at the very beginning that we haven't fully resolved yet. The Happy Meal isn't what you think. Not because of any single ingredient or any single decision. Because the entire object, the box, the toy, the food, the branding, the characters, the limited time promotions, the chemical engineering of the food inside, the lobbying that keeps regulators at bay, every single piece of it is part of one coherent system. A system whose purpose is not to feed children. Its purpose is to create, as early as possible, a neurological and emotional attachment to a brand that will last a lifetime and generate purchasing decisions worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Dr. Robinson said the kids' perception of taste was physically altered by the branding. That sentence, from a Stanford researcher studying 3-year-olds eating carrots out of a McDonald's bag, is the clearest summary of what this system actually accomplishes. It doesn't just sell food, it edits reality. For children who are too young to know that reality is being edited, the parents who give in to the nagging aren't the failure point. The scientists who miscalculated the trans fat risk aren't the failure point. The politicians who take meetings off the record aren't even the failure point, though they should be. The failure point is that we keep looking at the box and seeing a meal, when the box was never designed to be a meal. It was designed to be a mechanism. Now you know what it actually is. And if you want to understand how this same architecture of engineered desire operates in the drink sitting next to that box, there is a video that goes into exactly that. Watch it next. It connects directly to everything you just learned. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If this changed the way you look at the fast food industry, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know which fact shocked you the most today. Thanks again for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.